أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بالنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا من خزائن علومك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. My brothers and my sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's evident that the greatest enemy of the Ahlul Bayt is jahl, ignorance. The greatest enemy of humanity is ignorance. And the greatest enemy of Imam Al-Mahdi Ajallahu Farajhu Sharif is ignorance. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ignorance comes in many forms. Yesterday we spoke about different types of ignorance when I mentioned compound ignorance. There's someone that doesn't know, and then there are those that think they know, but they don't know. And that's even more dangerous. We've been speaking about the coming of the Imam in the specific details of what the Ahlul Bayt tell us within the sources. So when it comes to Islamic Shi'i eschatology, we've been speaking about it in detail until we reached the point yesterday in which the Imam returns. What I want to make clear is when the Imam returns, yes, there is Sufyani, yes, there is Dajjal, yes, there is the people of Rome, yes, there are all those different enemies that I mentioned, but the greatest enemy is ignorance. Why? Because Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has a narration in which he says, a minimal amount of the Shia who are supposed to be the people that know about what's going to happen. That's why it's important for us to know about this prophecy. If you want to ask, why are we discussing this topic? It's important for us to prepare for what we are told in the prophecy, because the people, us, who are supposed to be preparing for him to be his army, a very minimal amount of us will pass the test to be with him. Imam al-Sadiq says this. And then many of the 313 warriors are from all over the world. Very minimal amount are Arabs. He said the only ones that pass are the ones who امتحن الله قلبه للإيمان. The one who Allah has tested his or her heart for faith. The truly tested one. In the times of difficulty, in great times of difficulty. I want to give you an example. I remember 2 years ago when I was in Lebanon, I've been in Lebanon for 11 years, and I was there right when ISIS first came out, and they came into Beirut, and they would a lot of time put in bombs in cars and everything. So I was there throughout all of that, and it was all difficult. And then came the time of the sanctions, and that time was very, very difficult. So there was no meat in the village. Water was always filled manually. We still do that. There was no petrol. The petrol was the most difficult thing because you couldn't travel anywhere. So everyone has a parked car and you have to walk everywhere. And it's very difficult to walk far distances. There is no public transport. There's no bread. So this is all of us. Doesn't matter how much money you have. It's not there. You can bring all the money in the world. There's no gas. There's no oil. You can bring all the money in the world. It's not there. And I remember I was at the gym. I was training. And then I heard a few brothers at the gym complaining, deeply complaining. Where is everyone? Where are the brothers? Why is no one taking care of us? What's going on? And they're complaining. And then they blame some of our leaders. And it annoyed me. So I told them, I stopped training. And I said, why are you guys doing the same as what the people did to Imam Ali alayhi salam? After he takes the Khilafah, they start to blame him for everything, whereas he just inherited something after it was destroyed for 25 years. Why are you blaming him? He's trying to make everything better. You're blaming him. You're doing the same thing right now. You're blaming a person or the people that are trying to help us. How is that going to make things any better? We're supposed to be strong. We're being tested. You think that you're going to pass a test if you're comfortable? We all want to stay very comfortable. We say, free Palestine, but keep me comfortable. Keep me so comfortable, I don't really want to go through everything. Palestine won't be free if you're all comfortable. If you want to go out and protest and you want to make it evident that you're against what's happening in the world, you're against oppression, and you're actually going to make a difference, you think people are going to leave you alone? You're not going to be left alone. You're going to be made uncomfortable. And you have to be ready for that, because that's going to be a test. And your heart will be tested for how far you're going to go to help your brothers and sisters, to help the poor, to help the needy. So I remember I went home. You know what I did? And I'm not saying it because it's me, Aslan, it's not even my money. People, alhamdulillah, they're very generous. Sometimes they tell me to help poor people in the village. I help poor people in the village. I put in $50 notes in envelopes from you guys' money. $50 notes in envelopes. And then I went to the gym and I gave it to the gym owner. And I said, give it to 1, 2, 3, fulan, 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 fulan. And tell them this is from the community. I never had a complaint again in the gym. But are you that cheap? Are you worth $50, man? Hey, then you don't speak? Haram, wallah. It's a shame. What a shame. You worth $50. No, I would rather go through the discomfort and speak to Allah about it and say, Ya Allah, I'm one of your men and I'm ready for what you need me to do. If I need to give from my heart, I'll give from my heart. Because I hope to be of those who امتحن الله قلبه للإيمان. So, we cannot hope in the next 5, 10 years of this struggle. There's going to be a struggle for the next decade. This is not even Islamic eschatology. This is Hussain Makke eschatology now. There's going to be a struggle for the next 10 years. You will be tested. And you can take the safe route and no one will harm you, you think. But when it came to the Jamaicans in the Windrush scandal, they harmed them, they took their British passports away. When it came to Shamima Begum, they took her British passport away. One day they're going to come take maybe your passport away. You think anyone's going to help you? They didn't help them. You think they're going to help you? If you don't speak up. Because our children, they're going to see what we did today. In 10, 15, 20 years, they'll find out. They'll find out what we did here today, and it will affect them. So this is the stand by which we must make it known that we are educated, we know our rights, and we're not doing anything wrong, and all we want is equality amongst people and to preserve human life. And I think those are good British values. That's what British values should be. You know, if that's what it is, we should subscribe to that. That's what it is. If it's not, if they're making it something else, what is that? Would I even want to subscribe to it if it means killing children? I'm saying this because it's very relevant. It's relevant to what we're speaking about. Just go on BBC News right now and you'll see, all right, there's people from Yemen, and then there's people from Iraq and Iran, and then there's people from Lebanon and Jordan and then Palestine, and the people they fight against are Zionists. And this is all in Islamic eschatology exactly as it's happening. I mentioned yesterday, we can't always say, this is what this is. Because even if the land is liberated right now, because it all revolves around Jerusalem in our narrations, even if it's done right now, if there is no Sufyani and no Nafs Zakiyya and none of this, then it's going to have to happen again anyway. Okay? So it's going to be another liberation in the future. These are all definite. In any case, we have to be ready for what's about to happen in times to come. Because the signs that started to take place all around us, no one knows when the Imam returns. I'm not claiming to say that. I'm claiming to say that things are happening very fast, and I hope to be of those, or maybe the next generation, that will witness his return. And it's not far-fetched. Sufyani is the arch nemesis of the Imam. He is from the people of Rum. The people of Rum are those who inherited the power of the Roman Empire, the strongest colonial power that tries to enslave mankind with its power, which it did in history and it tries to do today. And we can see that those powers right now, we see what they are. And it's obvious what they are. The Sufyani appears in Syria, between Syria and Jordan, and he is fast and rapid in dominating the region. He dominates everywhere. He dominates Iraq. He moves towards Hijaz because he wants to squash any notion of any uprising from the Imam. We mentioned the Imam was in Medina, waiting for the right moment. The Nafs Zakiyya, companion of the Imam and his messenger, goes to Mecca. He announces the return of the Imam, and then they kill him. 2 weeks after this, the Imam goes into Mecca with his 313 warriors and their 100 or thousands of supporters that are placed in and around Masjid al-Haram. They walk in, and then the Imam announces to the world that he has returned. The people come and they begin to give bay'ah to the Imam. The first to give bay'ah to the Imam is Jibreel. The people give bay'ah, and that night, the first night of the Imam's return, is a beautiful night in Mecca. There is no bloodshed. Everyone gives bay'ah. And it's a Friday night, the 9th night of Muharram. The next day is the 10th, it's Ashura. The Imam, now in the daytime, he announces to the world, after establishing Mecca that night, he announces to the world that he has come to liberate the world from its shackles. The world does not take very kindly to this announcement. In the narrations, it says that from east to west, people will curse this movement. So, when we're told that when the Imam returns, everyone's going to be happy and it's going to be heaven on earth, that's after much struggle. In the beginning, it's very difficult. You have to be very realistic. Now, imagine how this would happen. Obviously, if something big like this is happening, you can imagine whoever is in charge in Saudi Arabia at the time, whether it's this family or it's in 100 years, they're not going to be happy about someone claiming that he's the Mahdi and he's returning, and they're going to try to squash this. They're going to send authorities. Sufyani is already moving after the announcement on Friday night. He's moving with his army towards Mecca. So all the TV channels, all the news reports, everything is now reporting that this is a bad thing. These are extremists in Mecca, and they're calling for some sort of state, and this is something that we all have to be against, as they do, right? As they do. The Imam will make it known that he is welcoming followers. He establishes himself in Mecca. Sufyani doesn't even make it to Mecca, because on the way, a great occurrence happens in which much of the army, in some narrations about a third of the army that's with the Sufyani in that time, is swallowed up by the earth. So the earth opens up at that point. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts to aid the Imam through nature. The earth swallows up a third, in some other narrations has 12,000 of the soldiers of the Sufyani. Sufyani stops and he decides, because the momentum is now on the Imam's side and Sufyan is on the decline, he decides to go back to his center in Damascus and just make sure that that line from Damascus all the way to Jerusalem is going to be safe. He strengthens that line. So he takes all of his forces, he mobilizes all of his forces from Damascus to Jerusalem, Bilad al-Sham. That's Sham, okay? So Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine. He makes sure that his forces are there, that if the Imam's going to come, they're going to be ready for it. The Imam's in Mecca. Once he has about 15,000 warriors, and after 2 months, the narrations say, he begins his movement towards Medina. He goes towards Medina and he meets with his followers in Medina. The hypocrites, the people of evil, they begin to flee because the momentum is on the Imam's side. At the same time, the people of Rome, the great powers, they're preparing their naval forces, their aerial forces. They're sending everyone to Jerusalem. They're sending everyone to Sham to be with their man, their ally, Sufyani. The Imam in Medina, he appoints Al-Khurasani as the general of his army. And now the narrations, they begin to tell us about not exactly the chronology of where he goes and how he gets there, but they mention, there's a narration, for example, that he meets with the Khurasani in Iran and the people of Iran. The main two nations that are with him are the Yemenis and the Iranians in this army at that moment. The Yemenis and the Iranians make up the bulk of his army at that time. He does all of this before his grand entrance into Iraq. This is his main place, Iraq. He wants to go to Kufa and he wants to sit in that place in which his grandfather ruled from. That's where he's going to establish his base. So he's getting everything ready before he gets to Iraq. There are a few skirmishes beforehand between his soldiers and other entities around the world, because you can imagine now I mentioned a global war that is happening at that time. That in our narrations it says 3 million people are killed. It could be more. Then the Imam decides it's the time to enter Iraq, but he enters it in a very specific way. Now he starts to show his powers and miracles begin to occur. And he decides to enter Iraq first by himself. He wants to enter by himself. His army follows, but he wants to go by himself. Maybe because he wants to visit the different shrines in Iraq to pay his respects and do ziyarah of his grandfathers. He enters Iraq, and our narrations say he enters through 7 domes of light. So he enters aerially. He enters through the sky, through aircrafts. We don't know what those look like, but they're described as 7 domes of light. I believe it's سبع قباب من نور. سبع قباب من نور. 7 domes of light. He enters in, he's in one of them, but we don't know which one, perhaps for security reasons. He enters in one of them. There are 7 that arrive at the same time, and it's a grand show. And people are receiving him. You think Arba'in, there are millions of followers? Millions of people? It's not going to be anything like Arba'in. It's going to be way more than Arba'in. SubhanAllah, I think Arba'in is a sign actually. A sign of what's to come. It's going to be very, very full. I don't know if Shabab Al-Sibtayn want to make a mawkib from now to prepare it for what's going to happen then. It's going to be very full. People are going to be, it says, from Karbala to Najaf. The Imam comes to Kufa. He sets up camp in Kufa, and then he goes to Najaf. He goes to Najaf to see his grandfather. He begins from Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he comes to Wadi Salam dressed in the armor of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because now he's going to make a grand speech. Because till now, Sufyani's been dominating. Until now, all the Imam's been doing is gathering followers. He hasn't fought back yet. He's just gathering his army, gathering followers. People are going to Iraq. People are going to Medina. They're coming to follow him. So inshallah, we're going to be going there to be with him. He's gathering all of us. Then he goes to Najaf to make his grand speech. So he made one speech when he announced to the world that he has come. Now is the speech where he declares war on Sufyani and what the Sufyani represents. The Imam stands, and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, it's as if I see Al-Qa'im in the armor of Rasulullah, and then it transforms into a radiant light. When he stands up, he rides a horse with a blaze between its eyes. And the blaze, wherever it looks, it lights up everything before it. That's what the narration says. Then, when the Imam speaks, afterwards, he holds a flag. And when he unfolds the flag, there is a stone in the corner of the flag that has come from paradise. When he unfolds the flag, it lights up from east to west. And 4,000 angels stand in front of the flag. So this is what the narration says. Now, there are many commentaries on what that may mean. I'll leave it to your imagination or to your research. He says that this point is when the tables begin to turn on Al-Sufyani, after the world is filled with killing and oppression and starvation, the Imam has come and declared war on the head of it, and then he makes his movement towards him. And he goes towards Damascus first, but his main aim is to get to Jerusalem. Before he goes towards Damascus, now he sends messengers, Sufyani sends messengers, and the Imam invites Sufyani for a meeting. And he says to them, bring my cousin to me, because I mentioned yesterday, Bani Umayyah and Banu Hashim are cousins. Bring my cousin to me so I may speak to him. And so the Sufyani and the delegation and the Imam and delegation, they meet. They meet in the middle. This is before he gets to Jerusalem. This is when the Sufyani is still in Damascus. And they have a meeting. And the Imam tells him that they will go and liberate Palestine, to leave the people of Rome, to turn back. And Sufyani is convinced. He starts to lose a lot of support. People are moving towards the Imam. They're witnessing great victories on the way. Everyone knew about the earth swallowing up the followers of Sufyani. And there have been a few skirmishes to secure the borders of Iraq with, again, the narration that says Atrak, or the brothers of the Atrak. Commentaries, they say that it's between Russia and sometimes China, because even people of the East and the West, they want to be involved in what's happening, and there are mountains of gold and oil and everything like this. So the Imam secures it from the Russians and the Chinese, and then he's telling the Sufyani to go back and move away with the people of Rome, the Western powers. The Imam convinces Sufyani, tells the Sufyani to give him bay'ah. And so the Sufyani at that point gives him allegiance. He's shaken for the first time in his life. But then, when he goes back, in the narration, he wants to vomit. He says, the Imam says he feels like he's vomiting from the inside. And he's disgusted with himself, and he regrets the decision. And then he tells his soldiers to all fall back towards Palestine, and they're all going to stand before Jerusalem and not let anyone take Jerusalem, to leave Damascus, and they're going to focus everything on Palestine. So look how important Palestine is, even to us. Everything seems to be there. So the Imam then marches on through Damascus with his army until they get to Jerusalem. Now, I mentioned yesterday that the fleets, the naval fleets, are all placed from the coasts of Turkey and Syria down to Jerusalem, but they don't help Sufyani. They don't want to help the Sufyani anymore, because the companions of the Imams came forward with the true version of the gospel and the Torah. So even the people of the West, the people of Rome, a lot of them now, they are shaken and they are hesitating and they don't want to be involved. And so the ones who go into Jerusalem are seen as renegades and rogue soldiers. And the Sufyani is losing his support. And this is what I meant by the greatest enemy is ignorance. Because even for them and the people of Rome and Sufyani, the Imam doesn't want to go on a killing spree. When people think that the Imam for them is the Antichrist because he's going to go and kill everyone, there is none of that that's done. The greatest enemy of the Imam is ignorance. And those who are ignorant and they want to remain stubborn and fight against the Imam, they are the ones that will go to war against the Imam, and the Imam will go to war against them. So the Sufyani's forces begin to leave him. He stays in Jerusalem. The Imam, he enters into Palestine, and they begin the great battle. And Imam Ali alayhi salam says that when this battle occurs, the birds will fight against the army of Sufyani with their wings. And the mountains will fight against the army of the Sufyani with its rocks. And the angels will fight against the army of the Sufyani with its voices. And this is how we need to truly understand the world we're in today. Look at the way in which the Imams speak about victory for the Imam and his soldiers. We have to have real belief no matter what the odds are. When the odds are difficult, it doesn't mean that we're supposed to be doubtful. Because we know, we have ultimate hope in the Imam, and we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be with us. Ultimately, there are going to be dark nights. There are going to be times when we don't have food. There are going to be times when we're hurting. But we can't be at a point where we leave camp. In the narrations, many people leave camp. Many people, they go on to the other side. And I'll mention that in a moment, what happens, how it flips again. But we have to be careful not to be of those that leave camp. Like some of the people left Rasulullah, some Muslims left Rasulullah in the Battle of the Trench. When things became very difficult, in the Battle of Ahzab, they left the Prophet. We don't want to be of those that when it becomes difficult, that we leave. Again, I mentioned that. So the Imam is saying, even nature is aiding him. And like a great descendant of his says, in Lebanon says the same thing. He says, you think that we are besieged. You think that we are the ones that are surrounded. But we think you're surrounded. You're surrounded. We're not surrounded. With us is the sky and the sun and the moon and the stars and the rivers and the seas and the valleys and the mountains and the angels and the seven heavens. We're not surrounded. You're surrounded. We're not surrounded. And this is how we have to believe. This is what a Muslim is. It's not just to pray 5 times a day and not eat pork. A Muslim believes in the power of Allah. That everything happens with the permission of Allah. And Allah can pause that permission when He wants. So He wants to disable an enemy, He'll disable him. He wants to give you power, He gives you power. I have to believe in Allah. Truly believe in Allah. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. True faith. So the Imam says, even nature begins to fight against the army of Sufyani until none of them are left and Sufyani is left alone. Sufyani is left alone with no helper. And so the Imam takes Sufyani to the Tiberias Lake, which is known now as the Sea of Galilee. It's the lowest freshwater lake in the world. He takes him there and he slaughters him there. He kills Sufyani there and then he enters Al-Quds. He enters Jerusalem, and at this point, the allies of the Sufyani are going insane. Because do you guys think that he kills him and then khalas, it's game over, everything's going to be fine? And no, we liberated Palestine and everything is fine? You think right now, if we liberate Palestine, if we actually do, you think they will leave Palestine alone? No, they're not going to leave it alone. The same powers that dominated 1,000 years ago dominate now, and they'll dominate in 1,000 years. The people of Rome dominated, they still dominate. And there is constantly a struggle between the indigenous people in this land, in that region, and the people of Rome, and who they want to hand over Palestine to. Even in the narrations. Even in the narrations, it's like that. Written hundreds of years ago. Okay? Prophesied over 1,000 years ago. Now, they begin to send their naval forces, their aerial forces. They're angry that the ones that they sent didn't get involved in the fight. They begin to send everything that they can to fight against Imam al-Mahdi. And then the Imam tells them to hold on. Not to go to war against him because someone is coming that they don't want to go to war against. So, as this is happening, Nabi Isa alayhi salam descends in Palestine. This is where the role of Jesus comes in. Because Jesus, He is the leader of the Christian religion, and the Christian religion represents the Western world. If they're supposed to have a religion, they say it's Christianity. Or Judeo-Christianity, they say. The Imam says, someone's coming. Jesus descends. And when he comes, the Imam sends him to the West. He goes to the Western world, and the Western world receives Jesus with celebration because they feel they also now have their Savior. He has arrived. But they think he is counter to our Savior. They are surprised to learn when he shows them his palm, it says, and with him is Jesus, son of Mary. So he says, he is with me and I am with him. He tells them that they are brothers. The people then calm. No naval forces are sent and no aerial forces are sent. And Jesus works on a truce, a treaty between the people of Rome and the Imam, as the Imam establishes his government in Kufa. So the Imam establishes his government in Kufa, and now this land, that whole region, is under the command of the Imam, and the Muslims go to live there, and they begin to prosper greatly. And the truce is reached between the Imam and his government and the people of Rome. A truce is reached. And the Imam relies on Nabi Isa alayhi salam to take care of what's happening in the Western world. And now Nabi Isa, he is there. He tells them of the true religion. He works in churches. He works with the people. He is now a very public personality in the world. And the Imam is a public global personality. So Jesus works as much as he can in this part of the world, but not everyone's happy about it, because what he's preaching begins to look a lot like Islam, and it's identical to what Imam Mahdi is preaching. And the truce is supposed to be for 10 years, and it's very similar to the truce of Hudaybiyah. So the truce of Hudaybiyah was the truce that the Prophet had, the treaty that he was able to establish with the Quraysh when they were in Mecca and he was in Medina. There was a treaty, and that allowed him to speak to the other tribes. This is the same way. The Imam was allowed to speak to the rest of the world. A truce, they reached this treaty, an agreement, peaceful coexistence. It was supposed to be for 10 years, but it only apparently lasts for what the narrations tell us, 7 years. In that 7 years, the Imam's government grows, technology advances. Everyone wants to move to the government of the Imam. People don't want to study anywhere else except they want to go to Iraq, because over there are the greatest universities. Medicine is advanced in Iraq at that point. Everything that people want is happening in the dawla and the government of the Imam. Everyone wants to move there. People don't care about the other places in the world anymore, which usually have the greatest pull. This is not something that they're very happy about. I mean, you can imagine Donald Trump is like, this is Jesus? You know, I don't think he'll be too happy about it. Yeah, he has an image of what Jesus is that is completely different to what Jesus actually is. You know, like the hardline crusader Christian type. They're going to be disappointed. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. They're going to be disappointed with what they see. Jesus is going to be the brother of Imam Mahdi. So they decide to break the truce. Just like the Quraysh broke the truce of Hudaybiyah, they break the truce. So there are two main wars that occur. The Sufyani is the first one, but the major one, the one that's understood as a world war, is the second one. It's the one that in Jewish prophecy they call Armageddon. That is the major war, when they break the treaty with the Imam. So the Imam would have been around for years. Nabi Isa alayhi salam would have been around for years. And then this great war occurs. Now, I mentioned the Dajjal yesterday, that we don't have too many narrations about him. This is where he plays his role. And this is where it looks like the Dajjal is a system. The Dajjal system mostly shows itself at this point, right before the great battle with the people of Rome, the great battle of civilization, the inevitable battle that's going to take place. Here, the Dajjalic system is, in the narrations, painted as a very advanced, technological, and highly sexualized movement. And I don't even need the narrations to tell me something like that is happening when I can see it right now today. This is how it says, again, he causes fitna, he seduces, especially teenagers and young men. Right? Because pornography is, right now, the multi-billion-dollar industry. Half the internet, imagine the whole internet, 50% of the internet is filled with pornography, 50% of it. 50% of it. It's the easiest way to take control of people, because they have very highly advanced forms of sexualizing people. It's the easiest way to corrupt someone. It's the easiest way to make someone lose respect in themselves, or make people lose respect in them. And that's how they attack. So understand, if you're battling something like this, you're battling Dajjal. You're battling his minions. Those are the minions of Dajjal. It's greater than you think. It's much, much greater than you think. They're trying to use you as small pawns. Don't accept to be used as a pawn. Be of those whose hearts have been tested to be with the Imam. So it's not simply when we say, are you with the Imam or you're not with the Imam? Do you want to be with... It's literally like that. It's not metaphorical. It's literally like that. That's how the narrations paint the movement of Dajjal, and it's happening from now. The system is happening from now. So this system is the system and the movement by which the people of Rome use in order to battle against the Imam. At this point, Jesus returns to the Imam, and this is when he prays behind him publicly. He prays behind the Imam publicly, and the world sees this. So the followers of Jesus, which are going to be millions, many millions, hundreds of millions of followers, they revolt against their governments. Many Christians come with the Imam. So this is not, I want to clarify, the Imam versus people of Rome is not Muslims versus Christians. The Imam is going to have Muslims and Christians and all sorts of people from everywhere around the world with him against the people of Rome, who would have been those who want to conquer and colonize and enslave the corrupt. So it's not a battle of religions simply, because many of those religions are going to come, and this is understood as Islam overall. That's what it's understood as, because the revelations all speak the same truth. So then they go to war against the people of Rome, and Nabi Isa and the Imam are victorious, and it's also said that the Imam kills Al-Dajjal, and here the final victory takes place. And then the Imam goes to the lands of Rome, and he goes to their capital. So wherever the capital is at that time, he goes to the capital to the chants of takbir. So many millions of people would have been Muslim. And he opens that capital. And then slowly the world takes in the Imam, and he establishes peace and justice to a level in which it was oppression before that. Remember, it says the world will be filled with oppression, and the Imam will return to establish justice the way it was filled with oppression. So just like the world was filled with oppression and there were still gleams of light, the world will be filled with justice, but there are still people who are hypocrites, but they're hidden. The government of the Imam is established, 313 generals. He sends them out to be leaders around the world. So they all go back to their countries, and in their countries they lead, and each one of them has, in the narrations, what is known as Al-Ism Al-A'zam. This is a great honor from Allah that gives them certain power. The only companion of the Prophet that had that was Salman. With the Imam, all 313 of his greatest companions will have it. And they will lead in their respective countries as representatives of the Imam. It's said in the narrations that whatever knowledge we would have reached, whatever level of knowledge we would have reached by that time, is only 2 out of 27. And that the Imam will give us the 25 at this point. That he will multiply and amplify whatever we were able to reach in terms of knowledge by 25. So this will be a great evolution of civilization. It's going to be way greater than even the way in which the world changed after the Industrial Revolution and the technological revolution. How the world changed from before the internet to after the internet. Can you imagine how the world was before planes and cars? And how the world was before electricity? Or how the world was before the internet? It will be even greater than that. The change from now to what will be even greater. And after 24 rainfalls, it's said, the plants and trees that will grow will be of what we have never seen. And then the Imam will bring forward gold and silver and food for all people of the earth. And he would say, O people of the earth, this is what you fought for, and this is what you cut your family ties for. Here you go. Everyone take as much as you need. There is no need for anyone to struggle in that way anymore. People will wish in this time, the people will wish that those who have passed away can come back in order to witness what has been established on earth, that justice finally prevails on earth. They will want them to come back and see. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be of those that witness that day. These nights have been dedicated to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam because she is the greatest proof of the Ahlul Bayt. She is the greatest proof of the Ahlul Bayt. We know where the companions are buried. We know where the Prophet is buried. We know where the Imams are buried. We know where the Shuhada of Badr are buried. We know where the Shuhada of Uhud are buried, of Khandaq are buried. But we don't know where Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam is buried. And this is an eternal message for whenever anyone asks the question, or whenever anyone questions the Ahlul Bayt, whenever anyone questions the movement of Imam Ali alayhi salam, Sayyidah Zahra, her grave is the first reply. Where is she? Why don't we know where she is? Because you can't whitewash it. Even Karbala, the greatest tragedy, you whitewashed that. You said it was a political dispute. You made it into a political dispute. The day comes, you don't even mention it. You don't even mention it. But when it comes to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam, you can't whitewash that because you have to be able to answer the question, where is she? Where is her grave? Why don't we know where it is? So people ask questions when it comes to Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam, and you have a right to ask. All you have to do is take yourself to that night in Medina and contextualize. And contextualize. Contextualize what's happening. Contextualize what happened and why it happened. Understand that Imam Ali alayhi salam was hated by those people because they had only become Muslim 2 years before. What were they doing before those 2 years? What were they doing? They were trying to kill the Prophet. All those years before, they were trying to kill Rasulullah, and they became Muslim for 2 years. And we expect them to just follow Imam Ali. They despised the Imam because there wasn't a family from which the Imam hadn't battled in the battles of Badr, Uhud and Khandaq. He had battled them all. And he had killed from their families people who were trying to kill Rasulullah. So they despised him for that. They weren't going to be with him. So we say, why couldn't the Imam fight them? Why couldn't the Imam, this is Imam Ali, this is Haydar Asadullah. Why couldn't he fight them? He tried. He said, all I need is 40 men. Imagine you have thousands from the Quraysh that don't like Imam Ali, and he's saying, I want 40 men and only 5 come. Just 5. Just 5. They're scared. They were scared. The Imam was alone. He tried to fight them. But at the end of the day, you want him to fight them alone? Yani, how does that work? He's a human being. How is he going to fight 2,000, 3,000 people by himself? How? How does that happen? Yani, we saw that in Karbala. That's not how it goes. And if the Imam does that, we wouldn't be gathered here today. Imam knows his main mission that night is to survive the night. It's not, a'udhu billah, for me to even say this, that he has fear. He must survive the night. So, they all give bay'ah to the first, and the Imam goes to his home. In his home, I want you to imagine his home. His home is connected to the masjid. Okay, so Masjid al-Nabawi, the Imam's house is connected to it. You know the hadith, Siddul Abwab illa Baba? Where the Prophet says, close the doors, lock all the doors except one door. There's one door connected to a house. Imam Ali's door. He was able to enter into the mosque through his door. So he opens the door, he goes to his house. Or he opens the door, he comes into the masjid. It was connected to it. He goes to his house. These people are gathered in the masjid. They gathered next door. They see the Imam's not there. And they need bay'ah from the Imam. They come out of the house and they go where? Right outside the door of who? You see, that door of Imam Ali is called Bab Ali. Baba, his door. When the Prophet Muhammad wants to visit them, do you think he went from the masjid into the door of the Imam? He'd knock from the masjid. He would come out of the masjid and go and knock on the front door. The front door. The door known as Bab Fatima. That door is where Sayyidah Zahra was when she was in the house. Who else was in the house? Imam Ali alayhi salam with his companions, Ammar, Miqdad, Salman, Abu Dar, and Zubayr. They sat down on the side. 5 of them sat down. Where would they sit down? They would sit down on the side of the house that belongs to Imam Ali by his door, where he would go into the masjid and come out. And Sayyidah Zahra is known to be sitting with them. Why would she sit with the men? She would sit away from them, on her side of the house, next to the front door. They come to the door, she hears the commotion, they begin to scream and shout. The men stand up and Sayyidah Zahra stands up, and this happens in a matter of seconds. They tell him, the daughter of Rasulullah is there. She's inside the house. And he says, when? So what? So what if she's in the house? And they enter the house. Everyone agrees that he says, so what? That's not a Shi'i tradition. Everyone knows that he said, so what? And then it ends, he goes home, yani. Or they go into the house. We know they go into the house. And here is where I want to make something very clear. People dispute about what happened inside the house. I want to ask, does it matter how many arrows pierced the chest of Imam Hussain alayhi salam? Does it matter how many swords struck Abu Abdullah alayhi salam? If it was 1,000 swords that struck Abu Abdullah, 1 sword struck Imam al-Hussain. That's enough for the greatest tragedy. 1 sword, 1 arrow. I'm not going to dispute 10 arrows, 20 arrows, 1 arrow. They enter the house. That's tragedy enough. They enter the house. As soon as they enter the house, you think Imam Ali doesn't run to them? Of course he runs to them. And it happens in a matter of seconds. But as soon as he gets there, they have swords on everyone's neck in the house. And they want him to attack, because if they do, he has... Now, these people, they will have their alibi as to why they killed Imam Ali alayhi salam. Because he revolted against the Islamic government, they'll say. So they go into the house and they break the door on the ribs of Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam. And she had a baby. And she loses the baby. She becomes sick. You know, in the nights that followed, you know what Imam Ali would do with Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam? Even when she was sick. And this is what it means when we say that the Imams are the hujjaj of Allah upon the people, and Fatima is the hujjah of Allah on the Imam. Some say that's a weak narration. I would say it's still true. Why? Because hujjah is that which you do yahtajja bihi, that which you use as a proof. Imam Ali used Fatima as a proof. You know what he would do? He would have Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam on horseback, and he would take her out in the night. And he took her to the companions. Look, see what they did. And she would speak. She would speak. And she would tell them, why are they not sticking by what Rasulullah asked them to do? And they would say their hands are tied. And she falls so tired and so sick until her last day. And she knows when that day comes, she dresses up her young sons Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein in the best clothes after bathing them and feeding them, and sends them to the masjid. Then she sits down with Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he looks at her and she tells him, you know why I did that? Because tonight is the night. Ya Ali, I want you to wrap me in the remains of the kafan of my father after you wash my body. And I want you to be the one to lower me in my grave. However, do it in the middle of the night and don't let anyone else be there. Lower me in my grave in the middle of the night. Don't let them come. Then she asks the Imam for time with Allah, and the Imam goes to the masjid and she speaks to her Lord in her final moments before her soul leaves this world. And when her two young sons come home to look for her, they don't see her. And they know their mother has left this world. When they see her laying down alone in the room, they go back to the masjid running. They come to their father crying. Imam Ali stands up and they tell him, لَقَدْ مَاتَتْ أُمُّنَا فَاطِمَةً. Our mother Fatima has died. Father, we've become orphans. Imam Ali takes his two sons to the house and they grab onto her and they begin to cry and cry and cry. Sayyidah Fatima told Imam Ali, especially take care of Imam Al-Hussain, because Imam Al-Hussain has a very soft heart. And at that point the Imam kept crying and telling her, mother, speak to me. Speak to me. Jibreel tells Imam Ali, remove Hussain from the chest of Fatima, because the angels cannot continue to cry when they see Abu Abdullah crying like this. And so the Imam removes his sons and they take the body of Fatima alayhi salam in the middle of the night to the place where no one knows where her grave is. Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein say goodbye, and then the Imam stays alone with the body of Zahra. He lowers the body into the grave and he begins to speak to Sayyidah Zahra under the moonlight. His final words as he takes the soil with his hands and places them into the grave. He says goodbye to her fragrance. He says goodbye to her voice. He says goodbye to the heart of Fatima. And now Ali is alone. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, the amana is returned. Ya Zahra,